which are real-time reaction to the kinds of streams that are being generated. What is hot in the news industry, internet industry, what's hot in the financial industry. Just the sheer volume and doing simple counts on streams gives you a very good sort of proxy of coming up, proxy to a very sophisticated recommendation algorithm which you would run to say recommend content.
Dhruba, what do you think? You know, Hadoop is primarily known as a batch processing system, and do you see this evolving to stream and real time, and or you just throw the whole thing and like Google and others start something from scratch?
Yeah, I think it will remain a batch processing system for some time, but people will build systems on top of it or do indexing or do other kinds of extensions to Hadoop so that it's a little bit more real time. But I think it will be quite a while before it comes close to, as far as latency is concerned, before it comes close to traditional, say, Teradata or kind of an Oracle system. So the latencies are quite different from those kind of systems. And I think it will remain like that for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about, you know, these new applications and streaming applications, people have already built new platforms, right? So if you look at Storm from Backtype now being acquired by Twitter, they basically kind of said, hey, we're going to build a streaming version of Hadoop in some senses, you know, massively scalable, scale out, to deal with these new type of applications, right? And in the traditional world, that might have been CEP, right? Right, except, you know, CEP suffers from exactly the same problem that traditional RDBMSs do, SMP RDBMS. Sorry, yeah. It just doesn't scale, right? So whereas, you know, people built Hadoop to say, hey, we want a data warehouse that just scales forever, people have said, now we want a kind of like streaming infrastructure that just scales forever. So we're starting to see, you know, commonality with the traditional world being rebuilt.
The only thing I just add is that when you say, like, what was this vying for Hadoop and what's the view, it all depends on your view of your definition of Hadoop. So Hadoop writ small, like MapReduce and HDFS, that will be a batch system for a long time to come. But Hadoop writ large, this big operating system that processes data, these are just engines in the big OS, right? Because in the end, people are only going to build so many of these systems. They're only going to invest in so many. So it's all one big thing when you squint at it.
Yeah, we can.
I just want to make a case to support actually these discussions about the social gaming industry. So think about Zynga, think about EA, CloudStar. In our case, Little Chocolate. We process a lot of data, like hundreds of millions of events. And you may think events are, depending on the type of transaction, maybe at least if not exactly unstructured, but evolve over time. So we track different parameters, every time more parameters, so we need to adjust our database. And you think, okay, it's an industry which is pretty new, 3 years, more or less, so we don't know much about the traditional BI, and you will think these guys are perfect target for Hadoop. And you know what? That's not the case. All the top 5 tiers, they will use Vertica and Tableau, and because what we really care is about performance, it's about having the response very, very quick, and we have to deal with the problem of the structured data. It's a pain to add more columns if you want to support more parameters. But do you think that there's an opportunity of closing the gap and building tools on top of Hadoop that can improve the performance of it? And until that gap is not closed, basically all the industry that really rely on real-time data are going to still be choosing traditional data warehousing versus Hadoop, which is more batch processing.
Sure, I'll take a shot at it. So I think that's a very important question. It borders on the previous question too. Where do the deficiencies of Hadoop lie? And I think one of the big things that Dhruba talked about it is, and this is what we're seeing as we talk to customers every day, is there is some real-time aspect to how you want your query to be responded to. And there are some custom measures, if you will, that you will develop and ask the system. And if the system goes back and comes back with an answer 6 hours later because it's executing a MapReduce job and you can't wait for it, there has to be something built into the solution that you're using that is able to use an index intelligently to give you back the response. It may not be 100% of what you need, but if it has enough to give you something to get you going, then you can wait for the MapReduce job to finish and give you back the answer, so it's ready for you the next time. But you've got to have an intelligent hybrid of leveraging an index when possible and going to Hadoop when you can't.
I just want to pick up on that because I think the indexing thing is super important, right? So oftentimes, like, people say to me, like, what is big data? Like, my mother's like, what are you doing this big data thing? I don't understand it, right? You know, I get it if you're working on an iPod or something. So the question I have, you know, back to people is like, what do you think the single largest big data application that's used the most on the planet is on a daily basis? No. Google, exactly. Google search is a big data application. It's a bunch of unstructured data that's been brought in, slammed into a platform, and you get response back in, you know, microseconds, right? So the possibility is there to build a big data platform that responds at that level. But as Drupa said, it just hasn't been the design criteria when we set off in Hadoop world, right? So now we're starting to see, you know, these types of workloads wanting to be put on the platform, and there's development going on in the community to improve all parts of the stack. Right? It's just, you know, we didn't come from that place.
So I think we have to wrap up, and we'll take one question and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead.
No questions.
One and one.
Kind of. One leading to another.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I think more of a viewpoint I wanted to hear. If somebody is looking at Hadoop for a combination of unstructured and structured data processing, let's say 60-40, what's the viewpoint? Is Hadoop in the infant stage to support it, or in the toddler stage, or in the teenage? What's your viewpoint? That's one question. The reason why this question came to me is the reason I was talking to somebody. I'm not the Hadoop expert, but I did hear that mostly its data is, I'm coming from the structured database field, so mostly the data is inserted. There is really no override or update concept. So when we deal with such a large amount of data, if I'm hearing this, if this is true, how is it really even going to scale to the enterprise level analytics system? Because one of the major problems in the major analytics is the duplication. Unless you can really pinpoint and then make sure it's less duplicates, the accuracy is going to be in question. So that's the two-part question.
Let's have one question.
So I think there are two different questions that you're asking. One is that how to handle duplicate data insertion, right? So if you want to scale your system, I think if you have a system where you overwrite pieces of data, it's very difficult to scale it out because you have to bother about cache consistency and coherence and all that. So it's always better, if you want to scale it out, it's always better to write to new places and maybe garbage collect at the end. So that's the approach that HBase takes. HBase is a layer on top of Hadoop, so you can put data and it's all written to a new place, and there's an automatic garbage collection process that goes and deletes old data according to your policy. But so that helps in real-time analytics, right? Because the query processing time is less. On the other hand, if you just use pure Hadoop, then you anyway do sequential scan of all your data. So your batch processing time will be longer, but in your sequential scan, you can eliminate all duplicates and just take the records that you are interested in. Hope that answers your question.
And just to be clear, you are right. In HDFS, there is no update. There's no update in place. There's write and delete. And append, you know, mainly. You guys definitely have it, right? So so you definitely can append to it, right? But you do all of the stuff above it at the minute.
I think the first question was, if this is the case, how mature it is to really support both forms of data? What's the viewpoint?
I mean, I hate to be flippant, it just wasn't optimized. It's the traditional, if you try to do like transactional data, you know, like the type of stuff you do in an Oracle database, it just wasn't optimized for that, right? So the design choices that it made that gave it this great scaling and economic properties, right, meant that at the file system level, right, it's basically either overwrite or append. But as Drew pointed out, if you care a lot about that, you just drop this HBase layer on top, and now you get back your append, your inserts, your updates. Twitter's a big Hadoop user, and because people can delete their tweets, so the basis that the data changes constantly, they do all their storage on the HBase layer, so that they don't have to worry about redoing this deduping stuff.
Let's kind of, we'll do a last question, and then I encourage you to sort of find some of these people. They'll stay here, and so. So I read last week that the Homeland Security and the government, you know, they have this project called Big Data Eye in the Sky. Okay. And so, whether it's Big Brother or someone hacking into my Facebook profile and getting, the wealth of information that is there, the power of collecting all this information, the insights, the predictability, there's with any technology, there are kind of the good guys, the bad guys, the guys who do it for fun, the guys who do it for money. Do you think one day we'll all be like the guys in the Manhattan Project who say, shit, what did I create?
Are you asking whether we're enabling Skynet with Hadoop? Maybe.
Good. I'm deeply appreciative of the audience, all the great questions. I see a number of data, search, information luminaries in the audience also. So feel free to sort of catch any of these guys, and I hope we can continue this conversation. Thank you all for coming.